Hello, my name is Some Loosemore, and like so many board game fans before me, I've tried to make my own game. Recently, over the summer, a company called Button Shy Games put out a challenge, which they do from time to time, to see if people could make a worker placement game using only 18 cards. This fits their usual MO of these little tiny games that only use 18 cards, and they use a variety of mechanisms, and they run these competitions. I didn't enter it, that wasn't what this was about, it just kind of stuck in my brain. Worker placement is a mechanism I know relatively well, and I'd had a go at designing a game before that was, it was fine, little speed game for kids, it worked. It was okay, but this idea kind of stuck in my head. How is that even possible? So I've had a go. I recently put the files up on Board Game Geek to see if people wanted to try it out. A few people did, a few people gave good comments and feedback, so I've already updated the files a bit. If you've watched any of these videos before, or you saw this one, you will know my graphic design skills are bad at best. So this doesn't look nice. I don't yet have a theme, so it's a little abstract. I'll show you how it works, because a few people have asked me. My rule writing isn't great yet, so trying to understand the finer points of it. So let me show you how it works. I was going to say I will come back and tell you my opinions of it. I don't need to do that. Let me just show you how it works. Setup is super simple. You take the two board cards in the basic game and put them together. This creates the 6 locations for your workers to go to. Each player gets a set of trackers and a set of workers. These workers have different fulfillment requirements on them, which we will work through in just a moment. Randomly assign first player. So for this instance, the yellow player will be first player. Just give them one of the remaining worker cards. This doesn't count towards anything, it's just a marker to show who first player is. The aim of the game is to fulfill 2 of your 3 workers before your opponent. Whoever triggers that, so whoever completes their second one first, if it was the first player, the second player would get an additional turn, just so that everybody gets the same number of turns, but if the second player triggered it, that's the end of the game immediately. You achieve that by accruing resources and manipulating your trackers to have enough to complete these cards. Each tracker only goes up to 2, and you start it on the X, which is essentially 0. On your turn, you do one of 2 things. You either place a worker at a location which does nothing, that's your whole turn. So let's say I went to flip. And the other thing that you can do, there'd be more space than this is just for the tight shot I've got, I'm afraid. The other thing you can do is pull back a worker. By pulling back a worker, that is how you trigger the space. For instance, this yellow player pulled back from the circle space, which means they gain 1 circle, and to denote that, they rotate their tracker so that the 1 faces them. It's not the 2 that I can see, it's the 1 that you can see. That shows that they have 1, but you'll notice that there is a maximum of only 2 per tracker, and for instance, this worker requires 4 circles. How do they do that? They can use the flip action. So I pull back from here, and on the back of each of these trackers is another one of the resources. So mine, actually I need 4 triangles for my number 4 worker. And so I've got 1 triangle here, and so to fulfill the flip, or to trigger, the flip action, I flip one of my trackers. It was on circle, it's now on triangle. So now I have the capacity for 4 triangles if I manage to collect them. If, for instance, I already had 2 circles, when I flip, I retain the 2. Those 2 circles have become 2 triangles. It doesn't reset to 0. I retain the number that I had before, so that could be really helpful. Also a way of masking which ones you're going for to your opponent, because they can't see what's on the back of yours. I'll try to update the files so that you can see what's on the back of your own. So that's the 3 resources: gain square, gain circle, gain a triangle, flip one of your trackers, trade, nice and simple. Let's say I have 2 triangles. I can rotate this back down to being 1 to gain something else. So I rotate this up to 1. So I still have 2 resources. The number hasn't changed, but I've just traded in one for another. So flip manipulates a single tracker, trade spreads things out across multiple ones. At some point later in the game, let's say I do have my 4 triangles and they've gone over here and I've gone over here. You can always go where somebody else has been. You just offset it so you know what the order is. If I pull back my 4 triangles here at fulfill, that's how I complete this card. I have 4 triangles. So I'm going to pull back my 4 triangle man, spend my 4 triangles by rotating these back down to 0, flipping this. He is now out of the game. I do not have this worker anymore. Let's put him to that side just to make it a bit clearer, because here are my active workers. He's now out of the game. I now only have the 2 workers to try and complete 1 more. I couldn't, just as a little sub rule, I couldn't have used this card to fulfill this one. The one that I want to complete must be the one at the fulfill action. So if I went here, I actually wouldn't be able to do it because I've actually got 2 triangles and a square. That's not what this one needs. I should have thought better and put that one there to trigger that. So that's the basic ways of getting all the things you're going to need and how to mitigate those. But there is a little bit of a logic and battle going on the board itself. You'll notice here that my worker is on top of theirs. So my opponent, when it's now their turn, again, they can either place a worker or pull a worker, but they cannot pull this because it's blocked by mine, so they must place. They could choose to block mine as well, so creating a very mean little queue, or they could go somewhere else and do something else. So hopefully later I'll pull this one, so then they can pull that one. And the only other variation similar to that, when they have 2 in a row, so even if I had one underneath, it doesn't really matter. I could have this one here, I pull this one back, they're now going to pull these back, and they can pull them both back at the same time to gain 2 or trigger the location. So if it was trade, they could trade twice. If they're flipping, they could flip twice. Again, fulfill, very tricky, probably impossible to fulfill twice. So you'd only pull one of them. But if they're pulling here, they pull 2 circles. Now, as it is, they already have one, so they can actually only go up to a maximum of 2. They should have flipped their other tracker to be able to have space for it. But that's essentially all of the rules. You place a worker, or you pull a worker. If you can't pull, you must place. If all of your workers are blocked, this is the only other one, yellow is placed, it's now my turn, I can't place, I don't have any more active workers, I can't pull because they're all blocked, so I automatically gain a free resource. They've actually benefited me. Yes, not perhaps in the best way, and so there's a good timing of when to do that, because right now if they did it, I have full capacity of everything, I can't get anything. So now they would have to pull back. So now they might only pull back one of these to block me again, and I gain nothing. So there's a little bit of thinking there to be done, but that's essentially it. There is another board piece that you can use to make the game a little bit more interactive between players, which just adds a couple more slightly meaner take thatty type places. Force flip, if you pull back a card from here, or as many as you pull back from here, you get to flip your opponent's tracker. So let's say they have the 2 circles, I've force flipped. So I get to turn this over to square, and I get to reset it to 0, so they do not retain it. In return, let's just create a fake scenario. Let's say that one. If I pull back from return here, I get to pull any card, any worker, back to its owner's hand. So it could be that I return theirs so that mine is free, or I desperately need this one and it's worth giving them the combo, so I pull my own back so that I have it for another time, so it's not just sat there blocked for a while. But wherever you pull them back from, that card does not trigger the location. So it might be they're about to fulfill their second one and you send it back. So they're a little bit more interactive, a little bit meaner, but the fundamentals are still the same. Using your trackers, dialing them up, whatever number faces you is how many you have of them, flipping them over, mitigating them, rotating, trading to get different amounts, to fulfill 2 workers before your opponent. If it's a draw, which can happen, because first player triggers the end of the game by completing 2, and then I already had 1, and then on my last go, because I get the extra turn, I fulfill my second. We've both completed 2, so what happens now? There are numbers on the cards related to how many resources it took to complete it. We compare them. They have a total of 11, I only have a total of 9, so they would win. Let's say, for instance, we completed the same numbers, so we both have 11 here. Because of the blocking system, there is an ever so slight second player advantage, so for now, do check the rules to see if it's been updated, but for now, first player wins because second player had the slight advantage. But that's it, that should be all you need to know. So that's the basic gameplay. I hope that made sense. If it's something you're interested in playtesting for me, that would be really helpful. Yeah, I've stuck the Dropbox link into the description of this video. Do check back every now and then if you are interested in it, because I will be trying to update the files as I go in response to whatever feedback I get. Do drop in the comments if you've ever tried to make a game. It's not as easy as I thought it would be. My first idea with this system was okay, and immediately there were just fundamental flaws that I couldn't picture just sitting there doing it myself. Played it with somebody else and immediately went, oh, I've made huge errors. Okay, let's tweak it, let's redesign it, got some feedback. So I'd be interested to see that process continue. It doesn't need to be 18 cards. I probably don't need 3 sets of workers or anything like that. That was just to meet that challenge that I initially followed. But do let me know what you think. If you're going to be mean, be polite about it. If you're going to be positive, hooray! But honesty is the best policy. That's the saying, isn't it? Yeah, never mind. It's actually inspired me to do a little series on designing, not necessarily my designing process, but on design itself. A few people have asked me, because I do a mechanism series, what other elements kind of factor into what I like and don't like about games. So I'm going to start a design discussion series as well. So do keep an eye out for that, and hopefully the thumbnails for that will be slightly more interesting than my usual ones. I'm learning little bits as I go. If you are a graphic designer and you feel like giving me a logo or a template for thumbnails or visually designing my game, that would be amazing. But I have zero expectations of that happening. If you want to see what I'm up to in the meantime, do find me on social media. Just search Some Loosemore, you'll find me. Do subscribe to this channel if you don't already. Hit the bell icon so you stay updated when I put out new stuff. I'm really glad you watched to this point. I hope to see you again on the next one. I've been Dieter for Some Loosemore. Goodbye.